So, you want to manage your debt. In most of the world, you're told that it takes cutting out every luxury, living on ramen, and selling your soul to get out of debt. But what you actually become is miserable. That's not even a joke. But on the bright side, when you make an X post about your financial woes, you can do it with a sense of humor. If you haven't guessed by the title, managing debt is actually very easy, even if you think your financial situation is a lost cause. If you compare your debt to every other financial problem out there, it's really not as daunting as it seems. When people like you and me say we want to manage debt, it means a bunch of things. We want to create a budget that actually works, ideally one that doesn't make us feel like we're living in a monastery. We want to understand interest rates, so we're not blindsided by those sneaky charges that seem to pop up out of nowhere. We want to pay off debt strategically, so we're not just throwing money into a black hole. And we want to build better financial habits, not just for now, but for the long haul. The problem is, most advice on the internet is so vague and philosophical that even if it works, the only people who could actually follow it are financial gurus and trust fund babies. And if you instead look for specific advice that you can actually try right now, this is what you get. Cut out your daily coffee, sell your car, live on rice and beans. These things sound good, but at some point, you have to, actually live your life. So, what can you actually do to manage your debt without sacrificing your sanity and your morning latte? Stick around, and I'll show you some real, practical steps to take control of your finances. So, what can you actually do to manage your debt that's not just the same tired tips recycled from your grandmother's frugality handbook? The main thing you need to do is budget. What kind of budgeting? It depends. Simple budgets are good for beginners, and they give you a clear picture of your income versus expenses. Also, if you categorize your spending, it makes you feel like you have control over your finances. But most people go straight for detailed budgets, which indeed is the key to understanding exactly where your money is going. For example, just by creating a detailed budget, you can see how much you're spending on those daily lattes. The key is to not be obsessive about it. Wow, I spent $50 a month on coffee? I should stop drinking coffee. No, don't do that. Just maybe cut back a little or find cheaper alternatives. While this is considered a good idea by the standards of a finance blog comment section, in real life, swearing off your small joys will make you miserable. Change the drastic cut to a manageable adjustment, and now we're talking. Let's redo that budgeting decision. Wow, I spend $50 a month on coffee. Maybe I'll cut it down to $30 and save the rest. You can manage debt while also enjoying life and sounding like you know what you're doing. The key is to adjust your spending without making yourself feel deprived. This way you'll actually stick to your budget, which will make you see real progress. Now, how do you start budgeting? It's actually really easy. You don't have to use the same complicated spreadsheet everyone tells you to use. Just think of how you normally spend your money and start tracking it. Now, Google budgeting apps or use a simple spreadsheet. Here's one that looks good. Usually these tools are free, but if your finger slips, you might accidentally end up subscribing to a premium service and accidentally get a whole suite of financial tools. Well, now that you have the tool, you'll also find that not only can you track your spending, but you can also set savings goals and monitor your progress. There are two things you should know before you start budgeting. Unless you track your expenses, your brain will think it's unnecessary and forget about it. You only need to know the main categories of your expenses to get a clear picture of your finances. This is called the budgeting curve. It's a graph of how good you get at managing your money over time. As you can see, just by tracking your expenses a little bit, you can make a lot of progress in the beginning, but you have to keep at it. No one ever learned to budget by just reading about budgeting. You only learn to budget by actually tracking your spending and adjusting your habits. The same applies to managing debt. It only becomes manageable if you give your brain a reason to remember your spending patterns. So, once you create a budget for the month, go ahead and stick to it. It doesn't even have to be perfect. Just start with something and adjust as you go. Now that you've got a budget, let's talk about those pesky interest rates. Interest rates are like the villains in a superhero movie. They just keep making things worse. Understanding them is crucial to managing your debt. High interest debt, like credit cards, can snowball out of control if you're not careful. So, how do you tackle high interest debt? The main thing you need to do is focus on paying off high interest debt first. This is called the avalanche method. It's where you pay off the debt with the highest interest rate first while making minimum payments on the rest. This way, you save money on interest in the long run. But if you need quick wins to stay motivated, the snowball method might be for you. In this method, you pay off the smallest debts first to get that satisfying feeling of crossing debts off your list. Both methods work, and you should choose the one that keeps you motivated and moving forward. So, just by focusing on those high interest debts first, you can start to see real progress. And once those are out of the way, the rest will seem much more manageable. Remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Just keep chipping away at that debt, and soon you'll be in control of your finances instead of the other way around. But let's just imagine that budgeting and understanding interest rates are things you can't tackle right now. Like, imagine you have multiple debts and you're trying to figure out the best way to pay them off. Ideally, you'd look at your finances, make a plan, and start executing it. But not everyone has the luxury of time or mental energy to dive into financial spreadsheets. This is how you get good at managing debt. Use everything you learn. And if you can, imagine yourself in the moment where it'll be useful. This is basically how debt repayment works. You decide which debt to tackle first, and then create an imaginary situation where that choice is useful. This is usually enough to make your brain at least attempt to remember the information. Some people think that setting reminders or automating payments will help them get better at managing their money. And they're right. But in reality, building better financial habits comes from simulating the actual situations in which you'll need to use what you've learned. If you don't have any practical situations, make your own and convince yourself that the stakes are high. Like, pretend that missing a payment means missing out on a fun event or treat. Learning information and making it seem useful to your brain is all you need to build better financial habits. And this is why practical applications are the S-tier method for mastering financial management. There's no fluff, no hand-holding, no distractions, just pure habit-building techniques and a bunch of practice scenarios. If you can't think of any, search online for financial habit-building tips and accidentally download a free guide on the topic. So, once you read a chapter on financial planning, go ahead and create a plan for your own finances. It doesn't even have to be perfect, just start with something and adjust as you go. This way, you'll never forget the information because you've given your brain a reason to remember it. But let's imagine you're reading about investments and you see a complex chart about stock performance. Ideally, you'd start investing right away, but not everyone has the resources or the risk appetite to dive into the stock market. You can still practice by just imagining. Imagine the moment where you decide to invest in a stock. Put yourself in the situation, find a video, and pretend that's your portfolio. By imagining the whole process from start to finish, you convince your brain that you've used all that information and now you'll remember it. Meanwhile, the person who just looked at the chart and tried to memorize it still won't know what to do if they ever decide to invest. Managing debt isn't just about numbers, it's also about managing your emotions and mindset. Debt can feel like a dark cloud over your head, but it doesn't have to control your life. Focus on your progress, celebrate small wins, and don't be too hard on yourself. This way, you'll keep a positive mindset and stay motivated to tackle your debt. Some people think meditation or stress relief techniques will help them stay calm and focused, and they might. But in reality, keeping a positive mindset comes from making debt management seem useful and achievable to your brain. Learning how to manage your debt and making it seem achievable to your brain is all you need to take control of your finances. And this is why practical, actionable tips are the best way to manage debt as quickly as possible. There's no fluff, no hand-holding, no distractions, just pure information and a bunch of real-life applications.